second. So I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but this week is National Transfer Student Week, which is pretty exciting. And so I'm glad we have Dr. Jason Taylor, who's a professor in educational leadership and policy, who's a fantastic professor and also has done a lot of research on transfer students. So I couldn't think of anyone better to this presentation. So from now, I'm just gonna let Dr. Taylor take it away. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul, and good morning, everyone. I guess it's afternoon now. Good afternoon. We just past noon, and thanks for joining us today. As Paul mentioned, I'm an associate professor in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy, and also, sort of one of my research areas is studying transfer students, transfer policies, community colleges, and I think about things like how community colleges and four-year institutions work together to support students prior to transfer and after transfer, how state policies are shaped to facilitate a lot of students who are mobile and transfer. So it's really fun to share some of that with you today, and actually think a little bit more broadly about sort of faculty and faculty mentors. And I also have an appointment in the Office of Undergraduate Studies where I'm the Director of Transfer Pathways, and primarily what we do in that office is work with Salt Lake Community College and support faculty and advisors to align curriculum and programs and sort of help smooth the transfer process on the back end. Some of the things that you often don't see as transfer students, but we're working to make sure courses transfer and articulate, and that students sort of know what courses they should take prior to transfer, that type of thing. So it's fun to be able to spend some time thinking about that. So I'm gonna share my screen here. Let's hope this works. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna go into slideshow view here. Can you see that, Paul? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Great. So, so we're gonna talk about excuse me, faculty and mentoring, and a little bit about transfer student research as well. So, so I want to start with a chat waterfall. And by this point in the pandemic, maybe some of you have done this in class. And for those of you who are joining in person, I'm going to ask you to sort of shout out your answer, but here's how this works. So what I want you to do is answer this question in the chat, but don't press enter. Just type, if you're joining virtually, just type out the answer, but don't press enter yet. The question for those of you in person is, yeah, everyone can see the slides in person, yes. Right, Paul? Yeah,
I have a TV set up.
Yeah, oh, perfect. Okay, why did you come to this workshop? So hold that answer in your thoughts for just another 20 to 30 seconds. If you're there in person and if you're joining us virtually, go ahead and type it in the chat, but don't press enter. And I'll tell you when to press enter. We'll all press enter at the same time. And those of you in person can shout it out, right, Paul?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, why did you come to this workshop? Okay, so, and I'm going to pull up the chat here. I'm working from one screen, so I'm doing my best.
Do you want people in person to yell out now?
Yeah, I'll count down 3, 2, 1, and then everyone in person yell out, and then in online press enter. So 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
All right, so Paul, what did you hear in there? I couldn't quite hear everyone.
I heard in person a lot of people. So attending the workshops is one of our requirements for our Transfer Student Honor Society. So we heard quite a bit of that.
Oh, okay. That's what we see in the chat too. Yeah, great. And connecting with people. Excellent. Okay, well, fabulous. Yeah, yeah, that Crimson Honor Society is a really, really fabulous opportunity for you all. So thanks to Paul and everyone who puts on these workshops that help support that. Okay, great. Good to know. Just wanted to get a sense of why you all are here today. So I'm going to close the chat window, but Paul, if there's something that comes up, let me know. Okay,
Yes.
so now we're going to do just a little quiz. Okay, and my instructions for you are not to pull out your phone or use your computer. Which of these former US presidents was a transfer student? George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, or Barack Obama? Go ahead and enter your A, B, C, or D, or enter that into the chat if you're joining us virtually. If you're there in person, go ahead and shout out. Who do you think? Which former president was a transfer student? I guess I will pull up chat here.
What do you think? We're here D in person.
B, was that B or D, Paul?
B.
B, Clinton. And we've got a couple
D
people
for
guessing D.
uh-huh.
Anyone else? Okay. Those of you who guessed D were right. This is a passage from Obama's book, Dreams for My Father, and I'll let you read it here for a minute, where in his book, he sort of talks about starting out at Occidental College, and he transferred from Occidental to Columbia. And I don't know if there are any psychology majors in the room, but if you're if maybe some concepts in here, if you're wondering why, it looks like he was looking for a community, right? He was looking for a community of other Black students that looked like him, and he didn't have that at Occidental. So that's why, at least that's what we might infer from this passage. So there you go. One of our former presidents was a there might be some others, but I haven't done my due diligence. But you'd be surprised. I like to share that when you look at the number of students that transfer, it sort of varies across the board, but one really important stat is of students who complete a bachelor's degree, about half of them attended a community college at some point, right? So that could be before high school graduation. A lot of students take college credits in high school, but then a lot of students transfer. If you look at the U here, about 1 in 4 students are transfer students. So we get a lot of transfer students at the U and overall. So I want to just before we get started here, I want to just say kudos to you all for being transfer students and going through a transition process from one institution to another isn't easy, and there's a lot to navigate, a lot to think about. But you all transferred successfully, and I don't think we should, especially as Paul mentioned, this is Transfer Student Week. I think we need to recognize the type of decisions that you all made that are sort of difficult decisions when you move from one institution to another, and what sometimes feels like starting over. So I'm glad you're part of this workshop series, and grateful that you're part of our university community, and really proud that you're here as transfer students. So here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to talk a little bit about some research on transfer students that might resonate with some of you, and then we're going to sort of dive into faculty support and engagement, talk about why it's important, some ways to engage with faculty, some tips for engaging with faculty, and then just sort of open it up for a general discussion. I'm a pretty laid back person, so you can ask me anything you want, and I'm curious what's on your minds as it relates to this topic. So I'm going to tell you the good news. I'm going to start with the good news. I talked to Paul a little bit about this. Some of the research on transfer students So this research is about you all, like as transfer students. Most of it applies, some of it may not, some of it may resonate with you, some of it might not, based on your individual personal unique and personal experience. But the good news is that when you look sort of at the data across the board, and this is actually true for the U too, we've looked at the data, you all as transfer students are just as likely to succeed as similar students who start out at the U, or sometimes studies look at rising juniors. You're just as likely to succeed. So if anyone's ever told you that you're not, that's not true. If you look at the data, you're just as likely, if not more likely in some cases, to graduate and get across the finish line. So even though it it feels like sometimes that you're starting over at a new institution, or you might have sometimes there are some bumps in the road as you transition. The good news is that you're likely to the stats show that you're going to graduate. You're more likely to graduate than not. So keep that in mind as you think about the transition. Can I ask Paul? I meant to ask this, but are most of the students who attend the workshop series are just transferred this fall?
Yes, so I
So
would say almost everyone is a transfer student who started this fall.
okay, great. So yeah, you made it halfway through the semester at a new place, so you're gonna succeed. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you some of the things that we know about what you may already be experiencing, or what you're likely to experience based on some research. There's some challenges in the transfer process and the transition process, and sort of support is a really important thing to seek out. And I actually think you all attending this workshop and maybe attending the series or in the Crimson Honor Society are on the right track by participating in some of the things you're doing. So let's talk about some of the things that we know from research. On average, and some of this is going to apply to community college transfer students. That's mostly because we have more research on students who transfer from community colleges. My guess is that some of you might be coming from other four-year institutions. And some of this literature and research applies, some of it maybe doesn't apply, but generally, I think we can extrapolate to broadly to many transfer students. So on average, students lose 22% of the community college credits when they transfer. Can I get a show of hands for those in the room, or maybe a shout out, or those on chat? Like, how many of you lost, say yes or type yes if you lost credits, if some of your credits didn't transfer when you came to the U. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
It was a yes from the room.
yeah. How much does that suck? It really sucks, doesn't it? Yeah. So, rest assured, that's one of the things I'm working on in my role, and at least for definitely really, really tightly with our partners at Salt Lake Community College. And sometimes those credits, maybe you thought you were going to major in, business when you were at your prior institution, and now you're majoring in anthropology, right? Well, those business credits don't apply to your anthropology degree, but sometimes, our institution and other institutions just don't accept credits, and even as elective credits, and that's a problem, and something that we're working on. But it doesn't feel good. It makes you feel like it's going to take you longer to complete. But know that you're not alone, and know that this is a problem that particularly at the U here I'm working on, and I know some others are as well, right? So and if you think you should have gotten credit for a class that you didn't get credit for, there's actually some processes that we have in place that Paul can probably point you to, and I can point you to also, right?
Yes, talk to me.
Yeah. Talk to Paul, because there's ways that you can petition if you think you should get credit and you haven't gotten it. And we need to make those petition processes clear and accessible to students. So, okay, let's move on. Transfer shock. Okay, so this is something that's super interesting that I've studied a little bit, and it goes back several decades, but it's sort of this idea that you look across the board, oftentimes, transfer students come in to a new institution with a high GPA from their community college or prior institution, and then sort of dips when they in their first semester post-transfer. And I say it's a temporary dip because what actually the literature shows is that most students recover. So as new transfer students, if you find yourself with a lower GPA this fall, don't be discouraged. It's more likely than not, then you're gonna, there's an adjustment process sometimes when you're learning the standards, the culture at a new institution. You might, maybe get a lower grade or a couple lower grades than what you got at your prior institution. It's not unusual, but know that on average, you're gonna adjust. But it's something we call transfer shock. Lots of different reasons for it, but generally, there's a new academic climate and culture, new faculty. Oftentimes, depending on the institution many of you are coming from, that you could find yourself in bigger classes here. So, and then there's this thing we call transfer student stigma, and I'd welcome if anyone has thoughts on this. But generally, when we've studied this, we see that transfer students tell us that they feel like they're maybe feel rejected or they don't feel as valued as because of their transfer status. I don't know if any of you feel that or have felt that. I apologize if you do. Trying to shift that at the culture at this institution, but and the great work that Paul's doing and I think, and others are doing is, sort of speaks to the value of that. We've got a lot of transfer students on this campus, and that's not how we want transfer students to feel. But if you're feeling that, again, there's resources to support you. But it's not uncommon if you are feeling that. Reach out to someone. Let us know if we can help, if we can be helpful. Okay, so I'm gonna share. Whoops. Yep. So one really interesting thing that you might have heard in your orientation, your transfer student orientation, and Paul, feel free to jump in here. I'm not sure of all the details, but one of the things we do at the university and is we try to help students develop academic and social connections, right? Through all sorts of programming and opportunities to be involved and engage. And when we look at the research on transfer students, it's sort of mixed. Some transfer students say, I really, it's not really important to me, or, I don't have time to be engaged. A lot of transfer students don't live on campus. It depends on the college, but anyways, it's sort of mixed on how important these academic and social connections are. And again, sometimes transfer students aren't as interested in being involved, right? Like what it feels like to start over at a new institution. It can take a lot of energy and effort. Sometimes transfer students, they just, you want to complete your degree and finish your program, which is fine. But what's important? So I'm going to share a little bit with you, and this is based on research. What are some important things you should be thinking of and doing as transfer students, even if you feel like, I don't have the time to join a club, or I don't have the time to maybe really engage in sort of the culture on campus. Paul, you have a question or something come up? Saw you.
No, we're good.
Oh, okay. I saw you unmuted yourself. So, okay. So what some of the research tells us is that experiences that are like in class, experiences are connected to your academics, that also helps you connect socially with other students as transfer students. Those are really important. So, if there's ways to engage with your peers in class, those are really helpful ways to connect with people. Again, if you need to do group projects as part of class, or if you voluntarily want to and can engage in study groups, those are really important things to do as both academically and socially, right? It helps you connect with people and it helps you learn together. Faculty research, and there should be a comma after that, sorry, right? Many of you might have graduate school aspirations, or maybe you're just generally interested in research. And we're going to talk a little bit about this in a minute, but really excellent opportunities to connect. And then discipline focused clubs. If there's a club in your major, it's a really a really important way that you can get involved, and sort of think about ways to connect academically and socially at the same time, especially if you're someone who might not have time to, join other types of organizations or participate in the campus culture in other ways. You should also be thinking about developing transfer student capital, which I would say that's just sort of a broad way that we think about, the types of resources that you have to be successful as transfer students. I think you all are successful already because you navigated the transfer process. You made it from your prior institution to the U. That takes a lot of capital, a lot of knowledge and resources. So, but continue, and part of this workshop series and what you're doing in Crimson Honor Society, these are all ways you're learning about a lot of the things you need to do to be successful as a transfer student. So keep that in mind. To continue to seek resources and find ways and people to help you be successful, which is the last point, right? Folks like Paul, people like myself, other faculty mentors, staff mentors, peers who are transfer students, lean on those people when you need help. All of the, I'm not just making this stuff up. There's actually really good research that shows all of these things are important for your success as specifically as transfer students. So I wanted to share those nuggets with you based on what we know from the research. So with that, I'm going to transition a little bit to thinking more specifically about faculty. And I'm going to start with this broad question of why faculty and support engagement is important. So anyone have an idea why do you think it's important? Anyone want to type something into the chat or share a thought in person?
Jeff?
Faculty kind of helps guide you to use the resources around the campus, because a lot of times they run the programs and stuff.
Did you hear that, Dr. Taylor?
A little bit. Faculty run programs.
And then also kind of connecting to faculty to become more involved at the U.
Yeah, great. That's right. Yeah. Faculty can help, direct you to resources, or they run a lot of programs. So maybe, if you're interested in, working with a faculty member in a center, an institute that they direct, or a lab. Awesome. Any other ideas or reasons that folks want to share? Okay. Yeah, so I'll name a few, and I don't think this list is necessarily exhaustive, but research. I sort of alluded to this, but just reinforcing my prior point, we've got evidence that shows if you engage with faculty, it's actually really important to your success for a bunch of the reasons that I'm going to mention below this. But just know that I'm not making this up, or just this just isn't just Professor Taylor's advice. It's we actually have empirical research that shows that this is really good for you as a student and your success. Why? Well, learning, right? Most faculty are here to be really partners in the teaching and learning process, right? And when students need academic support, you go to your faculty or your TAs, right? I'll talk a little bit more about this in the next slide, but it's actually a really important part of your learning process, and we love it. We love it when when students are really engaged in their learning, and we can connect with students about the course and the course content. Career connection. So your faculty member in your discipline, in your major, they really know your field the best. They can, if you're someone who might not, you might not be sure what you want to do with your major or with your degree when you graduate, or maybe there's a lot of opportunities. Your faculty probably can really help with some important conversations and help direct you to internships, or help you think about the breadth of career opportunities in your discipline. Oh gosh, I can't emphasize this enough, that I think, having conversations with faculty about career opportunities is just really an important thing to do. And so if you haven't already done it, think about it, as you start to get, as you take courses in your major here at the U. Research experiences. Can I get a raise? Just raise your hand or a shout out for those who's interested in doing research in a lab or working on research. Not everyone is, and that's okay. Can you raise your hand if you're here virtually or there in person?
Like at least 6 in person, raise their hand.
Yeah, we've got a couple virtually. Okay, great. And you can put your hands down for those virtually. Yeah. So, this varies by discipline, I'd say. And I'm in the social sciences, and I know there's just different cultures in some of the different colleges on campus. So maybe talk to your academic advisor in your college if you're not sure. That's a good starting point. But your faculty are busy doing research, right? We're a research one institution. That's a big part of our job. So if you're not sure, if you just all of you just you're halfway through your fall semester, if you want to do research and you're not sure how to, I'd start with your academic advisor. But it's really key. The other thing to think about. I'll talk a little bit more about this, but scan the websites of your faculty members in your major and get a sense of what types of research they do, what their research expertise is. They're really the people that can help that you want to connect with. And again, some colleges have different cultures, so there might be research lab opportunities that go out via email. But I think your academic advisor in your colleges can really help connect you. But that's super. And then finally, just transfer student catch up. I think it's and this relates to my last point. It's sort of just faculty are we're regular people too. We have families and like to go out to restaurants and go to the park and go to sporting events, etc. So it's really cool to connect with faculty and for students, and for faculty to connect with students on a regular, sort of on a individual and a personal basis. So it doesn't have to be all business from your perspective. And I think some faculty may prefer that. That's fine if that's their preference. But some faculty also really like to connect with students. So which can really help with sort of the overall making connections, academic and social connections on campus. Okay, so these are some of the reasons why I think faculty support and engagement is important. So I sort of alluded to this earlier, but I'm going to speak a little bit from my experience when I was an undergraduate student a long time ago. It's getting further and further away. But also this book that I often like to reference when I think about sort of students and faculty connecting, and it's a book called The College Fear Factor, and it's based on this really great study of students and professors, and sort of one of the main findings and the premise of this book is that there's just this fundamental misunderstanding between the expectations of students and the expectations of faculty. So the expectations aren't aligned, right? So as faculty, what do we expect? We expect students to proactively engage with us, sort of like some of the things that I've already shared and some of the things I'm going to share in a few minutes. That's sort of what faculty, that's their expectation, right? And that students, what this study found, that was a lot of students avoided engaging with faculty. And this was, and the reason the book was titled The Fear Factor was because this was often driven by fear. And again, I'm thinking back to my experiences in undergraduates. It can be pretty intimidating to ask a question in class, to go up to a professor after class. I remember feeling that as an undergrad. So that's not an unusual feeling. But the point of the book is that this fear often, sort of prevented students from engaging with faculty when that's exactly what faculty expected students to do. So I share this with you just to say, it's normal to feel sort of maybe intimidated to approach faculty. But I also, think that, there's some strategies to help and some tips I'll share with you to maybe help alleviate those fears. And that, if you really want to connect with faculty, if you really want to do research, if you really, want to make some connections, sort of have to get around that fear. And a lot of faculty probably are expecting you to come to them. You might not, I wouldn't advise that you wait for faculty to come to you. And I say that not because faculty shouldn't come to you. I just say that because I think that's what some of the research says. And, faculty are busy. We've got, lots of students, right? So sometimes it's just from a capacity perspective, it's pretty difficult to reach out to every student all the time. So, and I share this not to, hopefully, I'm not reinforcing. If you do have any fear, or if you do feel intimidated, if I'm inviting you in to, validate and recognize that fear or that concern, intimidation can be normal, and that, the approach is, it's important to recognize it and then figure out how to work with it. And, again, I think faculty at the end of the day are regular people, normal people, but there's also a lot of heterogeneity in faculty, right? So some faculty can be very intimidating. I don't think they should be, but some of them are. Okay, so let's talk up through, we've got a few more slides here, and then we'll sort of open it up for any discussion or questions if folks have questions. So these are just sort of some practical ways and reasons to engage with faculty. Ask for help when you need it, right? Sometimes we don't know if students need help unless they tell us. So don't, it's okay to ask for help if you need it. And to some extent, asking for help is a signal that you're committed to your learning and you're committed to the class, right? And I'll share a few in the next slide, a few other tips for, when you do communicate with faculty. So I've got some ideas for that. Ask for more direction, more reading, more data about a certain topic. Sometimes when you're in a class, and you're struggling to understand a concept or something, something doesn't click, ask, it's good to ask for additional, where can you find additional support, or what other resources can the faculty, and I'll extrapolate to, sort of, this could be the TA also, what other resources or support could the TA or faculty member provide? And that could be because you don't understand, or it could be because you're really interested in the topic, right? Like maybe it's one of your passion, sort of the topic's one of your passion areas, and you really just want to learn more. So a great reason to just have an initial conversation with a faculty member, and a pretty accessible way to connect with a faculty member. Form a genuine connection, and this can mean a lot of different things, but the point I'm trying to make here is, it doesn't all have to be transactional. This might depend on the size of the class, and sort of your relationship, but again, it's sometimes good to know, something that it's great to know, get to know a faculty member or a student as a person, right? So there's lots of different ways you could do this, or that you could connect with a faculty member. One way that I often recommend is about their research and their interests. And I sort of alluded to this earlier, but if you're looking for faculty mentors, look at the websites of the faculty members in your department or in your major, and research their interests and see which faculty member might have expertise and research areas that are aligned with your interests, and ask them about their research. Ask them to tell you more about what they study and what they're interested in, especially if that's an area that you're interested in. But that's a really great way to connect with a faculty member. Faculty love talking about their research and about their work, and B, to maybe find research opportunities. If you do have shared interests, that could be a great way to sort of learn about what they do, and maybe get on find yourself in a lab or on a research team. Seek research opportunities. I think we've talked about that a little bit. And then, maybe seek other learning opportunities. Maybe, faculty members are looking for volunteers for a project, or maybe they're looking for teaching support if you find yourself in an upper division class, or just, if there are sometimes students have ideas for how they might, sort of be involved or extend their learning. So if you have other opportunities, I mentioned earlier, internships and career opportunities, I put those in this category, right? Like, what are some of the jobs? What job can you get with an undergraduate degree in anthropology? Ask your faculty about that, because I bet they'll have a lot to say about it. Or name the major, right? I'm using anthropology as an example. So, okay, and then finally, I think, okay, 2 more slides. Some tips. If you're not sure, ask your advisor, ask Paul, ask other sort of folks on campus, but I think your advisor can really help. Email etiquette. These are just tips, Jason's tips, and I just want to sort of recognize that there's, I think in some ways there's a generational gap between how students communicate and how faculty expect students to communicate. So I'm sort of sharing some suggestions here from maybe what I think how a lot of faculty might expect students to communicate. You've maybe seen some of these before, but be clear with your email requests. So if you're asking, especially if it's a blind request, and by that I mean it's a faculty member for whom you haven't already established a connection, what's the outcome of the email or the request? What's the purpose? Do you want to meet with the faculty member? Do you have a question about a career opportunity, a research opportunity, a letter of recommendation? So just make sure you're it's not, as a faculty member, you get student emails and it's not sort of like a mystery what the purpose or the objective of the email is. Avoid excessive back and forth. Faculty are busy, so and again, part of this depends on whether you already have a relationship with the faculty member or not. I always advise my students, like, don't try to interpret tone in email. I think some faculty members are just really short and to the point. That's just how they communicate. Don't take it personally. Try not to overinterpret the tone of any written words in an email. Then use punctuation and clear English. I think in the texting age, it's easy sometimes to lose sight of that, but faculty are pretty punctual, right? We have to be. We go all the way through a PhD. We are writers and editors, and emails that lack basic punctuation, clarity, sentence structure, can really send a signal to faculty that you probably don't want to send. So even if that's how you might communicate with, maybe in a more conversational manner, I just be as clear as possible and as sort of precise as possible with your written communication. Faculty are busy. Avoid asking for a lot of time, especially at first. Again, this depends on the nature of your relationship with the faculty, but a blind email asking for an hour meeting, that's a pretty big ask for some faculty. It depends. But faculty should, if you request a meeting, I think, I think they should meet with you. It might take a week or two because faculty are busy, but just, especially at first, I wouldn't ask for a lot of time. Like if you're interested in talking about career opportunities or research opportunities, 15 or 30 minutes is a reasonable time for a first meeting with a faculty member. Look for answers to simple questions before your email faculty asking about course assignments or other, maybe it's resources or links. It depends on the ask, but before you ask a question, can you find the answer yourself? So just keep that in mind. And then finally, if you want a letter of recommendation, many of you might be interested in graduate school. It's really important to establish a relationship with the faculty member first, right? Even if you have them, even if they're your professor in class, and maybe it's a small class with 20 people, and by establish a relationship, I mean make sure they know who you are. And this might be another place where you want to talk to your advisor, and your advisor would have some good tips. But the faculty member should know your name. They should know a little bit about you, I'd say. But it's important. You're going to need letters of recommendation for either graduate school or maybe other professional opportunities. So again, another reason why it's important to engage with faculty. And then finally, I'll end with, what if you have a negative interaction with faculty? First off, I'm sorry, that is not, I know a lot of faculty, and first of all, I'd say that's not the intention of most faculty members. Most of the people I know, the faculty I know, they're here because they're committed to education and developing students, developing people, doing really strong research, and their intent is not to, harm students. So, I'm sorry if that has happened to you or happens to you in the future, but it could happen because there's faculty are just unique, and we're all different. So one, step back and assess the situation. What happened? Why did it happen? Avoid jumping to conclusions, even though sometimes, when you're emotional, and I think we've all been there, it's easy to jump to conclusions, but maybe do a little reflection, figure out what happened, why it happened, try to talk to a friend or peer to get their input. Would they interpret the situation in the same way you did? Talk to your advisor or another staff member who can help you navigate the situation. And again, I'll just also say, like, negative interactions could be a really small negative interaction, or maybe it's something really serious, right? In which case it's really important to talk to, an advisor or a student success advocate, particularly if you think it's going to affect your grade in a class, or, you're not alone is my point, right? Talk to some other people and get some help, because my last point here is, don't let one negative experience with one faculty member impede your attempts or interest or ability to engage with other faculty. When I think back on my undergraduate experience, yeah, I had a couple faculty members where, I didn't have the most positive experience, but that was the exception rather than the rule. So, know that there's resources out there for you. Talk to some people. Know that you're gonna, you can and will figure out how to navigate the situation, but don't let that, prevent you from finding a faculty mentor or a research opportunity or a next, the next sort of experience that you need. We're here to help you succeed. We're also here to do other things like, research, and we all are very busy with service roles that most students don't see. We edit journals, we serve on local, state, national committees, we lead associations, and that stuff takes up a lot of time, and a lot of students don't sort of see that labor. So teaching is just one of many parts of our jobs, teaching and advising. And when we do that, we're here to help you succeed. And if you find that, a faculty member isn't helping you succeed, that's when you need to share. You need to talk to, sort of back to the beginning, look for someone who's an advocate for you as a transfer student, for you as a student. That's Paul, that's me, that's student success advocates. Those are your advisors, and we can help you navigate that situation and solve the problem. Here's my email address. I'd be happy to talk to anyone at any time, but I think we've got about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to stop my screen share and see if there's any questions, discussion, reflections, thoughts.
We have a
yeah.
question in the audience.
Go for it.
Can you hear me?
I can, yep.
Okay, so when I transferred here, I'd already done calculus 1 and chemistry 1, and I know this is kind of going back to the beginning of the slides, I guess, at this point, but and they were able to count for general education credits like math and life science or something like that. And I was able to get permission codes and go straight to like calculus 2 and a materials engineering class to take. But it's recently come to my attention that that's not necessarily the same thing as that class being counted off of my my degree audit. And I wasn't sure what the process was for that. And I was wondering if you were familiar at all with the process of getting those counted for degree audit purposes.
Paul, you might be able to answer that a little
Yeah.
bit better than me, but I've got some ideas, but go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, so I'll start. I did a lot of academic advising with transfer students before taking this role. And so I would say double check with your academic advisor in your major, because if you are able to take the next class, a lot of times that's what they're looking for. So one of the nice things is when you run a degree audit, it's actually what graduation looks at. And so you want to make sure everything is checked off. So for example, writing, you have a writing 1 and a writing 2. If you pass the second level of writing, it doesn't matter if you didn't do the first one, as long as you've completed the higher level. And so I would say just double check with the academic advisor if you've done the next level after your calculus class, if that will then say well, if you can do that, then they're not going to make you do lower math. So I would just double check with them of once you complete that, is that good? Because there's a potential that is, but I think it's definitely great to double check and make sure that by giving you the code into the next level, if that then we'll kind of make sure everything else is kind of cleared. I know that transfer credit is a little tricky, and this relates to CTHS, and that your grades from a prior institution are your grades, but when you look at your University of Utah GPA, it's only going to be the classes that you take here at the U. So if you got an A in Calc 1 at another institution, that isn't going to necessarily show for anyone, but you're still going to get credit and graduate. So those are kind of my initial things of double check with your advisor, because you may be okay, but I think it's a great thing to be let me just make sure that, that's okay. What are you thinking, Dr. Taylor?
Yeah, that's great advice. And then there's also this petition that it's on the admissions website, but it's a petition for acceptance of credit form, which you often need to find the syllabus of your transfer course. And I don't know if you've done this. Sorry, I didn't catch the name of the person who asked the question. I'm not sure if they've done this already, but that'd be, your advisor could help you with the petition also, don't you think, Paul?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, we have another question in the back.
I don't know if this would be helpful because that happened to me with the prerequisite, but I went through my major academic advisor, and they were able to, they had to do the petition, the syllabus with the game, because it was, so many years ago, but then what I understand is that they had to go through the dean or somebody in that department to get it checked off. And but they were very helpful, and they were able to check it off on my prerequisite petition and fit on my degree.
Okay.
Oh, Dr. Taylor, if you couldn't hear, another student shared that she had gone through the petition process successfully and just was saying,
Great.
encouraging everyone to do that. So thank you. Any other questions? Oh, I think there might be in the chat or anyone in person. I think this is a great opportunity to talk directly to a faculty member as well as a faculty member who works with researchers on transfer students. So don't miss this opportunity. You'll kick yourself later if you don't ask a question. So any questions related to, I appreciate you kind of going through like how to write an email or what to ask people on. Is there any questions about like how to navigate that? I know it can be tricky talking to a professor or faculty member. Yes.
I'm kind of struggling with like not living on campus and being engaged in the stuff that's going on. I don't know if there's any advice or anything about that, but it's just like when they say they're meeting on a club on Friday, for me, it's an hour commute to get here for a 30-minute meeting. It just seems kind of.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And so did you hear that, Dr. Taylor?
Yeah, I think the question was about how do you sort of engage with clubs and events on campus when you don't live on campus. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, Paul, you might be able to answer that a little bit better than I. I mean, I think some since COVID hit, I mean, a lot of opportunities have virtual options, or they're sort of like what we're doing now, right? You could be off campus participating, but how do you in that situation, Paul?
I think it's a good question. So thank you for asking. I would say like today, this workshop is both virtual and in person. I think you can always ask. I had a situation where I had a class and it was prior to COVID, but the person traveled from like Cedar City to the U and the professor's like, no, let me stream it on Zoom. So I do think like, even if it's not offered, I don't think it hurts to ask to say like, the example the student gave was like an hour commute each way for a 30-minute meeting. Like, I think reasonably faculty would be open to like alternatives. Do you think so, Dr. Taylor, of like explaining your situation?
Yeah, and I thought the question was more about like maybe a student club or something, but I think with faculty, if I don't know, I think it's reasonable for you to ask for a virtual meeting or a virtual plugin, but I also think, my sense of reading the climate and temperature on campus is that, there are places that and units and people who are ready to be back in person. We're not this is not an online educational experience that most of you signed up for. But, I also think a lot of faculty like doing work from home, myself included. So I don't think it hurts to ask. And I do think as a student, we're in this weird phase where we sort of came out of COVID, but we're still really in it in a lot of ways, and figuring out this hybrid world that we're all figuring it out, and it's changing in real time. So I think it's very reasonable to ask, and I think there still will be, whether it's virtual office hours with faculty or that type of thing. But there's also going to be probably some things like if you want to work in a lab, or you want to, be part of a student club in your major or your college. Some of those opportunities are going to be in person, and I think, if you really want to engage in those experiences, it's important to find time to do that in person. So you got to make that decision based on your own circumstances where you can and can't engage in person. But I think it's reasonable. I think it's reasonable.
We have other questions. I can't see behind the TV. Yeah, what's your question?
I have a similar frustration. So I don't know exactly the demographics and data of the school. Obviously, people young. I'm an older student. Like my daughter's here visiting, and she's the university. So I do think there has to be some more consideration I don't know what your demographics are. For instance, my first school is UNLV and their demographics aren't vets because people work. They're not, there's a
Mhm.
lot going into what you have time to get involved in. But I do think it's probably not healthy if your success model is based on in person because of COVID, because of how far away you live, because of how old you are. So I'm a little concerned about the suggestions or the data you're basing it on.
I don't know if you could hear that.
Can you hear
I
me?
think I caught most of it, yeah, and I think the essence of the question or comment rather was about maybe the assumptions behind what students who might be older or who can't get to an in-person experience.
Yeah, and if that's,
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about success for the students. Are we such a small demographic that you're not finding that success? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
I'm also like pretty severely disabled too, so it's kind of hard to get around for me.
Yeah, this isn't a campus for disabled people, that's for sure. My friend's son is here. And he's like,
Yeah,
so I just wonder, if you're talking about success and you've given some very good basic information, but I don't know that we're typical students if we come here looking for help. So I guess I'm saying that in response to, thank you for the information. There are things I've tried. I've also had quite a few experiences to prove them untrue and wonder what are you gonna offer us? Because I'm an outlier. Is anybody else an outlier in what he's saying? So,
I hear what you're saying.
yeah.
I feel like I'm doing well in school, but I am
me too.
struggling in one class where I have to take an earlier class with younger people than me, and it's a large class, and I can't connect with anybody. And it's hard for me to like find someone to study with, even when I felt prepared for a test or exam.
yeah. Well, I think you're. I mean, those are great points, and I think what you're getting at is what we know partially from decades of educational research is that one size doesn't fit all, and each student has unique needs. And I think what a campus like ours struggles with is how do you support and help every student, and that's very difficult to do for the adult student, for disabled students, for students with all types of different needs and identities. And yeah, I mean, I'll stick with my main. I'll go back to maybe something I shared at the top, which is on average, you all are set up for success, but that doesn't mean there's not going to be bumps along the way. And where there are bumps, there are people to help you. And so think of Paul, think of myself as advocates. I'm sorry if you're, and I mean that genuinely, if you're experiencing challenges, reach out to us. We're here to help you. And sometimes that path to support and help is not straightforward, and it can be frustrating. But let us know how we can help you and the help that you need.
And I'm also happy to talk with you after in person. So
Yeah.
stay around. So we're about out of time. We've had quite an interesting discussion. I'm gonna stay around in person, but I know that we had a couple students who let me know that they had to run. But we're enjoying it. And so I put in the chat a link for people online to sign in. We'll have a sign-in tablet in person. And I don't know how much I want to be mindful of your time, Dr. Taylor. I don't know if you have time for another question or just.
Yeah, I
thank you
can
so
stick
much.
around for 5 more minutes. I've got another
Yeah.
meeting I've got to get to, but I've got about 5 minutes. I can stick around. Yeah.
Any other questions? We've gotten to a lively discussion here. So anyone else want to share? And I think too, like, it's really important to bring up areas where it's not working, because I think at least for us in orientation transition, we have a lot of kind of programming is based on student needs. So we have a mentoring program that is transfer students mentoring other transfer students. And so I know that like those again could be older populations. We've tried to be mindful of particularly like transfer students who might be parents. That I think is a group that often gets overlooked. And so trying to connect students that way as well. But obviously there's a lot of room for growth. So hearing what's not working is also helpful for us to like
Yeah.
improve. So I definitely appreciate that.